Hello, welcome to another World of Warships review, and we are looking at the Castilla. I figured we kind of just start reviewing some tech tree ships, and why not start with, some of the maybe less popular ones. Castilla is quite unpopular, it seems, at least on the NA server. Kind of maybe get to why that maybe is, and kind of look at the ship as a whole. So starting right out, we've got a flat broadside cruiser, and I didn't lead him enough. This guy is lobotomized, not even touching his keyboard. Didn't lead him enough. That easily could have been almost a dev strike. So right off the bat, you see the kind of one of two gimmicks this ship has. Gimmick number one is the burst fire mode, which is obviously what everyone knows it for. But then gimmick number two is the speed. And you have the highest top speed in the game of all tier 10 cruisers. Now, there are many cruisers obviously that have a speed boost and do at times break your top speed, like the French cruisers, for example. But you do actually have the highest base top speed. Now, you not only have the highest base top speed, but you have a very, very good acceleration. You have the kind of acceleration that a lot of the light cruisers get. Not the British light cruisers, but things like Worcester, Nevsky, ships like that. You do get a above average acceleration for a cruiser this big and heavy, and combined with that top speed, which like I said is quite high, that leads to you getting to a very respectable speed super fast, number one, and number two, it leads to you staying at a high top speed, even when mid-turn. This thing, even locked in a hard turn, pretty much never dips below about, I want to say 32 knots-ish. I'm underleading this guy again. It's actually been quite a while since I've played this ship, and I've played 2 games today. You know how we like to do. We do a few games in randoms, and as long as there's 2 games that are back-to-back that highlight the strengths and weaknesses of the ship, then that's kind of the 2 replays we go with. So, this was one of those fortunate situations. I only needed to play 2 games to make this video. But when you're not using your burst fire gimmick, what are you? Well, you're kind of like a Henry with no reload booster. You have the same amount of guns, very similar HE alpha, almost identical salvo weight, almost identical HE DPM as Henry, almost identical, kind of everything. So you really are kind of a Henry with no reload booster, and I would say no speed boost, but honestly, because the Castilla has this really high top speed, this might sound crazy, but and you see here, so I'm completely locked in a turn, and yeah, we're going 31 knots, okay, so 31 knots, and that is actually significantly better than some ships go even with speed boost. There's quite a lot of ships, like Incomparable just comes to the top of my mind. Something like Incomparable loses an enormous amount of speed when turning. And the Castilla doesn't lose that many. Going 31 knots while locked in a hard turn is extremely good, and it does make up for a bit of the issues with the hull. And that's because the hull is really, really quite dog shit. I'm kind of struggling to think of a heavy cruiser in the game with a worse hull than this. I'm sure there probably are some. And you have a bit of spaced armor on this ship, but yeah, overall the extremities are 25. They're gigantic. You have the most pity fuck version of an icebreaker I've ever seen in my life. The Citadel is enormous, but not super high above the water. So you kind of are very, very easy to punish flat. Anything with overmatch. So you see this matchmaker is quite fortunate because they have 3 ships with guns that don't have 30 overmatch. So the Colombo is really kind of like the biggest threat in this game. A decent sap salvo takes half your HP in Castilla, right? So the ship is I think, very comfortable to play, almost exclusively down to the speed. the speed really does make up for a lot of the issues that the Castilla has. Now I'm sailing around and nobody wants to shoot at me, and I think I want to draw your attention to what you've probably already noticed, which is that we're a good bit away into this game, and I don't really have any damage. Uh, and you know, a Henry DPM with no reload booster is not great. I mean, there's really no way to sugarcoat it. The ship's base DPM, there you go. There's a Citadel. I went flat because this might sound crazy, but at that range, the amount of battleship players who actually properly lead a full speed Castilla is almost zero. So, you know, props to that GK for being like one of the only battleship players who at that range would have landed that salvo on me. Most people would miss. Most people would miss, maybe overpin my ass. And so the speed of the Castilla can lead you to develop some bad habits. Raise his hand, like you just saw there, where you kind of just say like, "Fuck it, I don't want to make time to play safe. I'm just gonna go flat to a battleship at 20 kilometers," because just like most people won't hit you. Um, the maneuverability, like the turning circle, the rudder shift is pretty okay. It's not good. It's not like completely pure dog shit. Really, the biggest issue this thing has is the size. You're just absolutely a gigantic. You're kind of like a Napoli hull. You're like a Napoli in the guns, in the basics of the hull, but then they slapped a gigantic superstructure on top of it and took all of Napoli's armor away from you, right? So, and gave you 1.5 kilometer worst concealment, because fuck you. You're a cruiser that came out in 2024 or 23, whatever it technically came out as, a new cruiser, right? It can't be able to outspot new battleships, right? I think the concealment on this thing is like 11.7, so a lot of these newer battleships like basically outspot you, like Incom just straight up outspots you, like Loria, you outspot it by like what, 0.6, whoop-de-fucking-do, so you like get to turn out before it just takes 90% of your HP with one sap salvo. Uh, so back to the speed though, the speed combined with the burst does lend to a very dynamic kind of like hit and run. Now you obviously can just like kite and HE spam, but that's not really the point of this ship. There's plenty of ships that do it a lot better, like Henry. Like Henry does that better. Henry kites and HE spams better than this thing. So while you can do that, and there are times you might be forced to do that, that's not really the point. The point is to kind of play a little bit more central, I think. That's how I like to play Castilla. I like to play more central and kind of constantly changing between pushing and retreating. Uh, and kind of like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just constantly be moving. I'm trying to almost never come to a stop and utilize this speed. Like you see how fast you get back up to pretty high top speed, and I'm going to slow down and come to a halt. So you see here it slows down okay. It's not the best. It's not completely terrible, but going from, say, we got down to 14 knots, you can see how like decent the mid-range acceleration is as well. And there you see another burst. The burst mode on the Castilla is almost exclusively designed to turbo fuck cruisers and destroyers. And this is going to be a theme throughout this video that I'm going to kind of probably complain about. We're going to try not to rant, but the Castilla in my mind kind of embodies every single, which is really impressive because not many ships do this. It really embodies every single problem that 2024 World of Warships has in the cruiser design department. It truly does. Basically, number one, concealment. Heavy cruisers that are newer don't get good concealment. It barely competes with newer battleship game design. Number two is armor. New heavy cruisers don't get any armor. Look to something like Cerberus, Commissar even. Russian bias people normally would claim that thing has no armor basically. So yeah, concealment and armor. This thing, the second anything with sap or 30 overmatch just kind of looks at you, you like kind of instantly lose half your HP minimum, which is very cool. And then a gun suite that is designed to give battleships a safe space. So you're not like a crazy HE spammer. You do have good pen, right? You know, that's why the comparison to Henry is valid, because you do pen, you do hit the 40 threshold for pen, which is nice. But the DPM, the HE DPM is like nothing good at all, really. And then the AP doesn't have remotely enough pen to Citadel battleships at anything approaching medium or long range. Uh, Funnily enough, if you follow the World of Warships dev blog and stayed up to date with the Castilla's release, the original gimmick of this line was actually that the burst was kind of an AP only burst. Uh, Not that you couldn't burst with HE, but basically the entire purpose of this ship line was to punch battleships with the burst. That was the original design behind it, and that's why you had this dogshit hull, this mediocre concealment, and this very mediocre DPM. Because the idea was that if you got battleships flat, the way this ship used to work is that when you popped the burst fire mode, your AP would gain penetration and damage. And the penetration it gained was like insane. I want to say originally this thing gained almost 50%, maybe even 50% penetration on the AP. And this is basically Napoli AP, which already has very high pen. So the Castilla originally could Citadel battleships at like crazy range. Maybe not max range, but like close to it. Like your max base range is about 17, and you could like comfortably Citadel the majority of battleships, definitely out to like mid-teens. Uh, and then what happened? Well, Battleship players absolutely cried. They shit and pissed themselves because it was super, super unfair that this cruiser that they look at with their eyes a bit squinty loses half its HP. But then if they go perfectly flat broadside like a completely retarded chimp, that this cruiser could then like 30 or 40k them back. Um, when they make an idiotic play, they lose 30 or 40. And when the cruiser does nothing wrong, it loses 30 or 40 to overmatch. Right? That clearly was not fair for Battleship players. Uh, and I say the only reason that was nerfed is BB players because it's just objectively factually correct. Because this AP on this thing still has, it still citadels every cruiser across the map. I mean, here you see what, I don't know if you saw what I just did there, but I stagger fire my guns. And I was hoping for a good rear turret burst damage, and that's something that you can kind of do in the Castilla, and I like to do a lot, is a lot of the time I will shoot my front guns normally without burst, and I'll only toggle the burst on for the rear turrets, because like in this fight, right, maybe I would want the front turrets back. Now what ended up happening is my rear turrets didn't do as much damage as I was hoping they would, uh, but this speed, as you can see, just allows you to get really, really aggressive really quickly in a way that a lot of people are typically not prepared for. Um, and this speed is going to basically completely save me from Colombo. Nice little 22k. And he nukes me with sap, but he didn't get his rear guns around in time. Almost solely due to the speed. Uh, the speed is the most overlooked thing, I think, on this ship. I think people draw their attention, rightfully so, right, to the burst fire mode. But if this thing just had like 3 or 4 knots slower, if it was like a 34, 35 knot cruiser, uh, I think it would be in a really, really bad place. And I think as it stands, the Castilla is like really not a bad cruiser. It is semi-matchmaker dependent, but I mean, 4 kills, decent damage, very decent base XP, top of the team. But you see the kind of damage, so like basically one burst on the Jaeger, because I think I did one salvo and one burst, right? The Tromp, most of this was one salvo, right? The Donskoy lost most of this in 2 salvos. And then the Colombo at the end, I think we like 22k'd him with the AP burst. And being basically Napoli AP, this does of course Citadel a ton of battleships, starting around like maybe the 7-ish kilometer range is where perfectly flat BBs can start taking Citadels from you. So you definitely can like seriously, seriously fuck with BBs in a brawl. Now, the problem with brawling battleships in this thing is comparing it to Napoli, because it's kind of similar in like the size, the gun performance, and that is the problem is not the lack of secondaries, because the secondaries are shit. The problem really is just the armor. Uh, it's really, really, really problematic. You can't go flat to low caliber, non-improved AP pen guns. We just looked at Napoli. That was the point I made. Napoli has that slope 30 mil armor internal. So anything that doesn't have 30 overmatch and doesn't have improved pen angles, basically you can never citadel Napoli at point blank range. You definitely don't have anything close to that. And the size of the 25 nose, we'll look at the armor at the end of the video, of course, is extremely problematic. Um, and just kind of like any battleship with hands is going to very easily 20 to 30 KU, point and click you, essentially. But I do think that that is not a reason to not brawl, and or not, maybe not brawl is the right word, but not push. And I see people kind of play this ship a lot in the kite, and it's not that it can't kite, because it definitely can, and it's not even that bad at it. But it's just like there's no point in, if you're not searching for broadside cruisers to use the AP burst on. You're not searching for DDs to use the HE burst on. You're not searching for pushing opportunities to utilize this excellent speed. Like, just don't play it. I mean, it's totally fine to not want to play this playstyle. Uh, but like, there's so many cruisers that kite farm like 100 times better than this thing. If you're getting like good average damage kite farming in Castilla, it's like just jump in the Hindenburg because it basically has better armor anyway. Um, yeah, I mean, basically my opinion. You saw that at the start of this game, I kind of HE kite farmed, and then because like I said, I haven't played this ship in quite a while, and it was like the monkey brain, the cruiser monkey brain was just like ooga booga, have to kite HE spam, and then like a few minutes into this game, I was like, what the fuck am I doing this in the Castilla for? And then I immediately pushed middle and spun donuts trying to get the burst on DDs and things like that. Like, you should be playing this ship. And right off the rip in game two, a good map and a good spawn. Middle positioning, like I said, is kind of the bread and butter of Castilla more than a lot of cruisers with shit armor. And islands are also your friend. So this is going to be a very, let's just say, interesting game. My carrier is going to have no idea what he's doing. And the enemy CV is going to basically just feel bad for him and make an interesting play. Let's just say that. And I'm just going to push mid this game and kind of bot the fuck out. And you're going to kind of see the speed of the Castilla on full display. So now this CAG is pushing middle. Okay, I'm loading the HE. My CV just spotted him. The CAG is now probably within about 15 kilometers. So all this guy has to do is come back, spot the Kagero, and I'll literally kill him. I will absolutely... There's no universe, if he just hovers on this CAG, that I won't kill him for free. So instead of doing that, what makes more sense than guaranteeing your team wins the game, or at least middle positioning by getting a destroyer killed? Well, just going and dropping the enemy carrier. Clearly that's a better use of planes, right? So, okay. All right. Lesson learned. I'm now thinking, all right, my CV is going to be effectively AFK, not help me the whole game. But that's okay, because, again, matchmaker quite favorable. They have no 30 overmatch, and they don't have any SAP BBs. So it's time to push, baby. It is time to push. God gave you almost 39 knots in the Castilla for a reason, and you are definitely meant to use it. So he's going to fly planes over, but he's going to like kind of just not understand destroyer positioning either. Like, the normal path that a human would take would be to circle through like this. He's just kind of like not going to do that, so I'm just going to keep pushing because I will eventually catch the CAG. I'm spotted by him clearly right now. It's the only thing that could be seeing me. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going, and there he is. I don't really know what he's doing. It's kind of interesting gameplay, to be sure. I'm not bursting just yet. And I probably maybe should have bursted here, but I thought for sure I would kill him in one salvo. And I don't quite kill him. Kind of unfortunate. He's not on fire either, but he is permanently spotted by my hydro. And here you see the speed. Just like look at how quickly I'm able to dive behind this island and dodge a ton of that salvo. That easily could have been really bad. So I've gotten the DD killed, basically solo. and I'm now going to cap. But the Zhao is going broadside to me, and look at the mini-map. There is something else going broadside, and I'm just hoping to see one of them. And there's the midway. There's almost no words to describe. So we're definitely gonna AP burst this. Definitely. Uh, this was a nice little bug, by the way. If you're wondering why I didn't shoot all my turrets. Yeah. Every now and then in this thing, this is something that you should know. Uh, every now and then this happens in the Castilla. When I burst fire, the guns don't all shoot. And it's usually the back turret that doesn't shoot. I don't really know why that is, but it is quite interesting. I've got another kind of, not super broadside, but not angled very well. So I've basically used like what 3 bursts this game, and I'm on 75,000 damage. Another thing to point out with the burst is that unlike the Alvaro de Bazan, there is effectively 0 penalty for burst firing in the Castilla. Uh, there is a tiny overall DPM hit, but it's like maybe a 2-second nerf to your reload. Uh, the Zhao has pretty good AP, but you do have a decent amount of overall layered thicknesses that you can kind of go flat to certain cruisers. Things like Zhao, Hindenburg, Venezia at medium range. You're probably not going to get Citadel, but stuff with really good AP pen like Moskva, you're going to get smashed. So, kind of just trying to slow down and dodge. I gave up a lot of HP, but I would argue like Worth, even dying in that situation, normally would probably win your team the game. Killing a destroyer, running their team off the cap, and killing the CV. But getting away from that is definitely nice. So my biggest problem in this lobby is basically the Louisiana. He's centrally positioned. His bombs can easily drop me for like 10,000 damage because he basically pens my entire ship, aside from like maybe turret tops, maybe. So just trying to play a little bit passive, get at least one more heal back. Getting up to low 20,000 HP, that would actually give me something to work with. Uh, yeah, I mean, you see, like, again, our carrier is going and torturing a Kleb that's AFK in their spawn instead of, spotting cruisers for me to dev strike, spotting DDs on C for our team to kill. Very interesting gameplay overall. Truly a CV masterclass between mine and the enemy CV. Truly on display the talent of the player base and the definitely normal to above average IQ of carrier players. We've got another cruiser. He's not super broadside, but like 45 degrees would be good. So he starts to turn and then he kind of cancels the turn at the last second. But, pretty fucking good damage again. This ship is extremely toxic to cruisers. Extremely toxic. And to destroyers. Those are like kind of the 2 types of ships that you're really cancer against, and you're kind of like whatever against battleships. If they fuck up and give big damage to Castilla, they've probably fucked up and given big damage to anything. Is kind of my point. There you go, 7,200 damage with the bombs from this guy. Kind of unfortunate, but the Sherman smoking up is obviously really good for me because that lets me go dark. And pretty solid HE burst blind fire. I'm trying to I like the ship. This is honestly one of my favorite cruisers. For kind of the same reason the Alvaro de Bazan is one of my favorite destroyers. And that's because the dynamic playstyle and the high impact use of the burst judiciously, intelligently, makes it a lot more interesting to me than a lot of HE spammers with good AP. I consider the ship much more interesting to play than the Henry. I think it's a lot more fun, a lot more interesting. Also, probably just better if you're playing it aggressively and you know what you're doing. I think there's probably just more game impact. You definitely farm less damage, but kind of like with the Alvaro de Bazan compared to an AFK HE spamming destroyer like Kaba. It's yeah, you're never going to average similar damage, but you're probably going to win way more games. because the gameplay is like inherently more high impact. So I'm spotted again, so that tells me the Jaeger had to have come back around. Uh, you know, it's unfortunate. My Jaeger's pretty low, so you can't really blame him. Uh, but one of those blind fires did give me a perma on that Sherman. Kind of unfortunate for him, but I just literally had nothing else to do, right? Like I can't push out because I'm going to get crossfired. Um, so now that he's dead, I'm still spotted. That's definitely the Jaeger. Um, my Haru and Jaeger are both very low HP, so I kind of am sympathetic to the idea that they don't want to push in, but you know, you would hope that your destroyer players would like kind of read the room and realize that their cruiser is pushing aggressively, and that means that they will actually be able to get a kill if they spot the DD. Um, so this guy just briefly ran into the Haru, which is pretty cool, and I'm gonna lose sight of him, but I'm still gonna burst. Maybe should have waited for the CV to spot, but you know, still like a very good hit. And the carrier had kind of proven a, let's say, a track record of semi questionable gameplay. So I like legitimately wasn't even counting on him spotting. I mean, here you see how far he overshot the Jaeger, how bad the fighters are. Um, so it was kind of the idea of why I wanted to burst right away, even though it was a blind burst, is I just didn't trust that the CV spotting would help me. So we've pushed mid, we killed the CAG, we killed the CV. We basically solo killed the two DDs at C, damage-wise. So now I can cap. And the game is looking pretty good, but realistically speaking, uh, if this Louisiana and this Commissar were any good, this would be extremely losable. And that's just down to the HP of me and my destroyers. Like, the Louisiana bombs did get nerfed after release, and they don't kind of one-shot DDs, but something like a Harugamo, a Marceau on that kind of HP, 4,000 HP, definitely one bombable for sure. So we're kind of getting very, very fortunate that this Louisiana seems to have no idea what he's doing, because this could be really bad, right? This could definitely go poorly. Uh, you know, us having the CV alive is probably going to make it overall unlosable. But there's definitely ways they could get back into this game if this Louisiana. You see, he's sending planes for the Wisconsin because funny damage on BB. Whereas if he just sent them for Marceau or sent them for Harugamo, he would like kind of guaranteed get a kill. He'd have above a 50% chance of one-shotting those DDs given their HP. So we've got C cap. I want to get B. Um, and another really nice thing about the Castilla burst, I said this in the Alvaro de Bazan video, but you're kind of less out of the fight on low HP because of the burst than the vast majority of other cruisers. Uh, because it's just two salvos, right? Like on this kind of HP, you don't want to get shot. So in anything like any normal cruiser, you'd be doing what I'm doing now, which is kind of like ducking in and out of the islands and shooting when you're about to stay safe. Uh, but just the fact that you have the two shots in the burst, right? Like only the back turret can clear on that guy, but you still get two turrets off. Uh, and I said that about the Alvaro too, and the Castilla is much the same way. No matter what HP it's on, it's going to get two shots off at you, and that's a really like unfortunate thing to play against. Again, particularly in like a cruiser, but even really more so, I would argue in a destroyer, because any good destroyer player worth his salt, let's say there's a Des Moines, right, that's on 4,500 HP, and you're in your just normal gunboat, like, or not even gunboat, maybe you're in like a daring on 10,000 HP, and that Des Moines really needs to die. Well, you can almost definitely get that kill and live, right? Almost definitely, because the Des Moines is going to get two or three shots off. The shells are kind of floaty. Even ships with better shell arcs, even doing that to something like Hindenburg, he maybe gets two shots off. But yeah, the problem is that if you do that to something like a Castilla, it's gonna fucking suck. It's gonna suck. And I don't I don't like the burst fire in this game. I don't even really like the fact that reload booster exists. I understand it's like a way to make ships different and more interesting, but I kind of fundamentally despise the design. I'm bursting this guy because he had kind of just shot. And, that's another really nice thing about the burst. There you go, like 8k damage. In situations where there's battleships, especially with longer reloads, and again, I said this about Alvaro, it's very relevant to Castilla as well. You can kind of wait for a battleship to shoot and then just burst, and you'll go dark before they can reload. And that's not really true of a cruiser without the burst fire mode that has to fire 2 or 3 shots to get the same, damage impact. It's like you fire 2 shots in your Hindenburg, and now there's like 22 seconds between, right? You have maybe 22 seconds to go, so it's a lot more sketch. Whereas this, it's like pretty much any battleship with 30-second reload base on half HP or more, you just fucking burst them. This is very unfortunate. I aimed a little back behind this guy. Really good damage, but no kill. Could have been a higher kill game. I could have bursted the keg and had another kill, and I could have aimed a little bit better on this guy and had a kill. This easily could have been like a 6-7 kill game, but the burst fire to me is just an inherently, and the reload booster as well. Ships like Bourgogne, Henry, Austin is, to me, feels a little bit less unfair because it's easier to time whether or not it has a reload booster up, right? If it hasn't shot for like a minute and a half, it has one. But got the Zhao, not super well aimed, but still very good damage. And the thing with the Castilla burst is, like I said in an Alvaro video that you should burst pretty much anything that's flat broadside and just accept the hit. But there's such a basically non-existent hit to your DPM. I was too busy focused on dodging that, so I fucked up my shot, and I should have loaded AG for this guy. Bit of a misplay, but it kind of feels, I think at least, I don't really play against Castillas because it's quite a rare ship, but when I get cruisers, it feels very unfair what I do to cruisers and destroyers, because the mental math that cruiser and DD players make, which is, okay, I'm going to turn out because I'm dead if I'm stuck here, so I have to get away. Yes, this cruiser has shots on me. Okay, he's probably going to do some good damage, but then I'm going to be safe, right? Like, if you're in your, Des Moines, and there's a Moskva, or, let's say there's a Moskva or something like that with pretty solid AP, but around a 10-second reload, you can make a calculated decision to say, okay, I'm dead in this position. I have to turn out. I know it's going to cost me HP, but, I'm going to only get citadeled one salvo, right? I'm going to turn out this Moskva, this Napoli, or whatever. Yeah, they might 25k me, right? They might get good dispersion and get 4 or 5 sits and 25k me. But then I'm going to get away. And the Castilla's ability to put a battleship level cell, I mean, I would argue more consistent than a battleship. I would argue against flat broadside cruisers, I'd almost rather have Castilla guns compared to most battleship guns, because you're less likely to overpen, and you're going to hit so many shells that you're probably getting the dev strike. I mean, battleships are more likely to luckily get those giant white bars and pure dev strike people, but when cruisers go flat to you and you don't miss aim in this thing, it is kind of like a guaranteed 40 to 50k damage, almost guaranteed. But another pretty good game. Crazy high base XP this game. The carry was in fact hard. And that's what I like about this ship. It doesn't farm damage that great. You know me, I'm not really even good at damage farming to begin with. And it's not like a playstyle I'm super into. But the high impact, I mean, It's like I said with the Alvaro. It's the comparison stands. It's very possible to like straight up win your team a game with 4 or 5 of these bursts. A DD got spotted by your teammate, and instead of 4 to 5K'ing them like you would in any other cruiser, you just get to 8 to 10K them. Cruiser went flat instead of 20 to 30K'ing them like you would in any other cruiser, you get to 50K them. Uh, a battleship's about to leave your range instead of landing 5 or 6 shells and maybe not getting a fire, you land double and you almost definitely get the fire. Uh, a battleship went flat broadside, and instead of getting one nice 10k AP volley with something like Moskva, you got a nice 20k AP volley. Because again, there's virtually zero DPM hit to bursting. Like you just bursting in the Castilla takes zero brain power. It's like, is this a situation where the damage per salvo is higher than normal? Broadside destroyer turning out, cruiser flat, battleship flat? Like, there's no other math needed. You just hit the burst, right? Uh, but, you know, big damage on Sherman, a little bit less on Jaeger. I think this was one burst on Chapayev. Uh, two normal salvos on the keg. The guns are very, very, very decent. The DPM is not great, but the guns themselves, I have no issues with the guns at all. I have an issue with the game design. Uh, I don't I don't like that burst fire is a thing. I think it's just inherently unfair. Same thing like I said with the Alvaro de Bazan. I think it's inherently fucking frustrating for the person on the other end. It doesn't feel like as overpowered in Alvaro as the user. The burst on Castilla feels like pretty broken to me personally as the user. I love this ship. Uh, when it first came out, I played the fuck out of it. There was a point where um, I was like highest win rate on NA of people above 100 games. I doubt that's true now. Um, but I played the fuck out of it. Um, I really do still enjoy it. Um, the reason I think a big reason in these two games that my games were so good is the lack of overmatch, uh, and not just overmatch, but like really horseshit, dog ass, stupid as fuck overmatch. Things like bungo, dude. If you are playing the Castilla into a bungo, like you literally just have to hope your team spots it early and play the other side of the map. Because that thing will just zero skill required railgun shit 30k minimum overmatch into you at any angle. Uh, Other ships with overmatch fuck you too, but the bungo is like probably the most egregious cruiser in the entire. Or sorry, the bungo is probably the most egregious battleship in the entire game to play against when you don't have any armor on your cruiser. It's stupid as fuck. Uh, just in general, the game design. We'll jump back into the port, but really, really good game. Two very good games. But this game was like crazy base XP. I didn't even think it would be this high, even though we killed some DDs. Um, but my overall issue is how the design of the Castilla is like the poster child of every single thing that is wrong in this game with the way the classes interact with each other. And the Castilla gets both the benefits that are stupid and the downsides that are stupid. Like, just to kind of, I'm trying to even make a list because there's so many. So let's start with one, the interaction that you have with carriers and subs. Well, you're huge, you're gigantic, so carriers hit you, pen you everywhere, and you have insane air detect. The air detect on this thing does not make any fucking sense. It's like Battleship air detect with 11.7 by sea and 9.2 by air. So CV's turbo dog shit, complete just insanity fuck you, and you don't have a lot of HP. Why this thing gets like 10,000 less HP than Napoli is totally beyond me. Um, and then, of course, this is also your detection by depths. So subs spot you at periscope at 9.2 kilometers. You're gigantic, and you get cruiser homing. So we've hit all the fucking highlights on how cruisers interact in the worst ways with subs and CVs. Now let's talk about how you interact with destroyers. Well, you're incredibly fucking unfair to them. You're kind of like a Venezia, kind of like how something like the Zao was like the OG Venezia, and the Venezia turned that shit up to 11. Uh, this thing is like almost as bad. It's not as bad for sure as Venezia, but it's almost as bad if you're in a destroyer. Uh, that's not very fucking fun. It's fast as fuck and it has a hydro, so good luck torping it, right? Fast as fuck, so good luck shooting it with a gunboat. So it's super toxic to it's toxic to play in the sense that you suffer mad against carriers and subs, but then it's toxic to play against if you're a destroyer. What if you're a cruiser playing against the Castilla? Well, you can never turn out against it because you can never make a calculated risk assessment to say, I'm going to let myself get 20 to 25k, turn out, come back, heal, win the game, maybe, survive because this position I'm about to put myself in is unmanageable. I have to turn out and accept a little bit of damage. Nah, this thing just gets to shit 18 shells at you in 1 second and get like instead of 3 or 4 citadels and you lose 20k, it gets like 8 to 10 citadels and you lose your whole boat. It's it's super fucking ridiculous in that way. Um, Also, like its concealment is too good for how good the AP burst is against cruisers. But then now that we've finished talking about cruisers, let's segue with the concealment topic into battleships. The concealment's nowhere near good enough to play into these newer battleships. Like you have .5 buffer on Bungo, dude. Like you're pushing in this thing at 38 knots at a 45-degree angle, right? So you're closing that .5 kilometer gap between you and a Bungo in like 5 seconds. So you spot it, you're like, oh fuck, it's a Bungo. Yet you turn out, you probably get turned out before it can shoot, and then it just fucking bam, it just railguns your shit for 30k at any angle. Anything with overmatch just like fucks on you. Like Vermont, Loria, Bungo, these ships, they overmatch you everywhere, and they have like a kilometer or less buffer range between your concealment and theirs. So it's like we've just and then let's go back to cruisers. How could I even forget? You have the gun caliber, right? You have 254s, so you overmatch ultralights like Minnow, Jinan, Smolensk, Austin, Colbert, all these ultralight cruisers. You just fucking ignore their armor, just nuke them from any angle, basically. Like why? All of these new cruisers, you notice this? They all have like high gun caliber. Like Novosibirsk is basically a worse Petro, but they gave it high gun caliber, so it stomps on ultralights. Piemonte, basically an overall worse Venezia, especially compared to Legmob Venezia, but they just gave it funny gun caliber, so it dumpsters ultralights. What did we just come out with? Commissar. Commissar is a very like decent-ish cruiser. Uh, but what is it's like? Why does it have 240s? Oh, because fuck your Minotaur. You just get nuked for 50k when you go nose into it. Like this thing is exemplifying every single issue that cruisers have in the game. Whether it's the version of they're unfair to play against in lighter cruisers or cruisers and destroyers, or they're unfair to play as against battleship subs and CVs. You're just like perfectly in this spot where it's not like a rock paper scissors countering, like I counter this and this counters this. It's like it is a rock paper scissors of who gets to drop the tactical fucking nuclear warhead on somebody. Like, oh, you are in the Castilla and a destroyer gets spotted in front of you. Tactical nuke incoming, 18 shells, right? Minotaur, 18 shells that overmatch it everywhere. Broadside cruiser, 18 shells that have 18 chances to citadel you. Oh, what's that? Now we're playing against a battleship, a sub, or a CV. We have 0 chance of survival and do 0 damage to them. Oh, man, it is just incredibly frustrating. All right, we're on with the build. We should probably talk about the build. Objectively correct, except you could grab Hydromon. You definitely want reload. Especially because this thing gets access to a spotter plane. The captain is not very heavy on skills, and you can buff this with Eye in the Sky. I don't think there's any reason to need extra range in this thing. The turret traverse, even with reload mod, is pretty decent, 26 seconds. I run Hydro, I run Spotter. I mean, the Wargaming, can we just like give everything with Spotter and Fighter? Them both. Like just Give me the pity fuck of popping my fighter when the CV drops me for 35k, you know? Uh, so yeah, definitely take spotter. I definitely do think Hydro is like specifically better on Castilla because it's so good at pushing in against destroyers, particularly. The Hydro is really nice, and you're huge, so having the Hydro does help you out there. Captain build, um, there's basically a bit of a point buffer here. So you don't have a lot of HP. You actually 100% want Survivability Expert. You 100% want Superintendent, Concealment, AR. Eye in the Sky is amazing on this. It's like it's the best 2-point cruiser skill, kind of objectively, if you can take it. You definitely want Turret Traverse and Gun Feeder. So, and I want Last Stand. I feel like this thing loses its engine. It just seems to happen a lot. And so I don't want to give this up. And so what kind of ends up happening is there's I don't want to lose any of these 3-pointers. I like to me these are mandatory. You need a 2-pointer, Eye in the Sky, objectively the best choice, and then you need these skills. So you're left over with 3. Now, what do you take? You could take Priority Target. That's 2 points. And then a 100% worthless top skill. You could grab like consumables. So that would probably be the change that I would recommend is you drop the pure cope that is heavy AP. You know, amazing how cruiser players only of a certain calibers even get a 3-point skill that is worse than the 2-point skill destroyers get and worse than the 3-point skill that battleships get. And this costs you 3 points, and you can't even use it on every cruiser. Huh. Interesting classist game design wargaming. The caste system. We must rise up, my brothers! Okay. Um, yeah. Just a cruiser moment. Just another cruiser moment, really. Another cruiser moment, this being a useless skill on everything. Another cruiser moment, outnumbered being useless on almost everything. So, basically, the two options you would be... back to the actual ship we're talking about, you would drop heavy AP, and then you would also, I think, drop Grease the Gears for top grade gunner. I think that's pretty valid. That does bump your turret traverse into the 30-something second range, which I personally am not a big fan of. You would then also either drop this for like PT, which you know I don't really care about, and consumable specialist. That's probably like overall better. But this is just admittedly cope. It's like, when I do 45k damage into that flat broadside cruiser, I now instead do 4750. It's like, does that fucking matter? No, it doesn't fucking matter. Why am I taking heavy AP on Castilla? Honestly, don't really know. Pure cope. That's the answer. Pretty shit skill overall on this ship, but you know, you do 5% more damage when you hit people flat. So overall, that's it. Drop Grease the Gears and heavy AP for top grade gunner, or drop heavy AP for PT and consumable specialist. Looking at the armor, the delight, the absolute delight. Remember, you're basically a Napoli hull. All right, let's just look at Napoli real quick. We just looked at it, but let's refresh ourselves. So they added a ton of superstructure, right? And then your ass is higher out of the water. So you're basically the size of the Napoli. And then you're just a gigantic fucking sock for battleship players to dump their cum into, basically. Um, like, what the fuck is this icebreaker? Like, is this even a historical thing that would or could ever exist? Like, why would a ship even have an icebreaker if an icebreaker the height of a rubber fucking ducky, an iceberg the height of a rubber fucking ducky hit your nose? Like, it would just fucking cook your ship. So, I don't. Maybe someone who is more knowledgeable about real world game ship design can tell me why you would want an iceberg that is 4 pubic hairs tall. So then the nose is 25. Like, they couldn't even give it 27. They couldn't even give you the pity fuck of not letting like Colombo and Bourgogne AP nuke you through the bow. Nah, it's got to be 25. The ass is a gigantic 25, and then the whole thing is 30, right? And then this little bit is 40. the Citadel we can look at real quick is a very weird combination of gigantic but not. So it's gigantic in like the length of it, right? It goes past the barbette considerably on the stern and even more considerably on the bow. So there's so much fucking, and the ship is long too. Remember, right? It's a long ship, so there's a ton of horizontal real estate to hit. But then it's like what the fuck is that? Where's my gun turret armor? What the fuck is that, Wargaming? Bro, the guys loading the shells into these barbettes are gonna need a fucking chiropractor. Like, what the fuck is that? So that's like super weird. I have no idea why it's like this. It's like they felt bad that the Citadel was gigantic, and they're like, well, let's make it like skinny. So because it's skinny, the Castilla does have a bit of troll armor. So like when you get shot under the guns, which on a lot of ships is a better place to shoot them, and that has nothing to do with typically armor thickness. What that typically has to do with is we're going to show the torp protection now. Generally speaking, on most ships, like Vermont, Bourgogne, Republic, like all these ships with heavily spaced, heavily protected armor, uh, the space between the Citadel and the outer layer of the torp belt is smaller under the guns. This is a fairly universal rule in World of Warships. Ships with spaced armor, battleships at least, typically have a narrower space between where the shell will arm and when it can hit the Citadel. So that's why on like a Republic at close range, like kind of your only chance to get a Citadel is under the guns because there's less spacing, so the shell arms in the Citadel and not before it hits it. Okay, but on the Castilla, that's like not true, and it at all. And not only is it not true at all, but you see how narrow the Citadel is. So like when you hit this thing under the turrets, there's a very non-zero chance that you just get a full pen, even though you pass through the Citadel. So, and then in that first replay, I talked about how you can go flat to cruisers. So you have 40, 150, and 40. So you do have 230 millimeters of armor. And as you can see, it's heavily angled, extremely heavily angled, especially under the guns. So this is why in the Castilla, you can go flat to ships with like decent AP. Like you could go flat to even a ship like Hindenburg at fairly like medium range and just not take a Citadel, which does surprise a lot of cruiser players. So like that Zhao in that first replay, I kept going flat to, and he just could never Citadel me. Yeah, that's the angle. It's like this Kremlin angling plus 230. So it's very effective against going flat to most cruiser AP, but then you go flat to battleship AP and there's like no chance. And then the shape of the Citadel is very strange, and it does mean that everything in the center is way more likely to Citadel you. Stuff that catches you close to the ends of the Citadel is a lot less likely to. Super intriguing, to say the least. Hull design and armor scheme design. So, that is the Castilla. A walking poster child of how bad Warship's current cruiser design is in every way, both the things that make you unfair to fight against and the things that make you unfair to play as against other things. Despite that all said, I absolutely love it. It's incredibly fun to play. It is probably some of the most fun you can have in a zero utility cruiser. And this is I'm gonna make one more comparison. I keep comparing this to I compared it to Henry, Napoli, Alvaro because of the burst. But I think a interesting comparison is the incomparable. I think that this plays very similarly in a lot of games to the incomparable. You're better at pushing in against destroyers, obviously, but it has to do with the way you kind of want to very aggressively push early game and kind of get closer than people would expect. And much like the incomparable, this is a broadside threat that can get close super early and break people's timing. Like, because you do have pretty good stealth of 11-7, but it's the broadside punching power. Like, there's just not really any cruisers in the game. Something like a Sevastopol, which is a dog shit cruiser, has that ability, right, of getting close way faster than the internal timing of cruiser players is, right? Like cruiser players are kind of thinking like, oh, okay, the battleships, I can get this close to the cap before I turn out, right? And I'm probably not going to get slammed. Or if I do get shot at, the battleships will be far away. But because the Castilla has this battleship level AP salvo threat to your broadside, uh, it catches so many cruiser players flat early game. It really does. Like you saw with that Donskoy. That's because the speed lets you get way closer than a battleship can get, but then you have the shell velocity and the AP pen and the volume because you shed out 18 shells. It's like getting shot at by a battleship if you're flat broadside in a cruiser, but it's a battleship that got way closer than you could have possibly thought, much like something like Incomp or Loria or Bungo kind of can, right? But this thing then has the speed on top of it. So it's for those reasons, I think it's just way more interesting. Uh, One of those bizarre situations where like the ship is either incredibly brokenly overpowered depending on matchmaker or a giant punching bag depending on matchmaker. So a little more matchmaker dependent than some pure HE kiters and some utility cruisers, but overall, I think an extremely, extremely fun ship. And if you do not have the Castilla for some reason, I think you absolutely should get it and try to play it. It is a very interesting ship to kind of work out, um, and it offers a dynamic and potentially very high game impact playstyle. It's probably my highest win rate non-utility cruiser I have, really. Um, I just think you can really, really impact the game with just a few of these burst fire salvos, and it's super satisfying to do so. So we're gonna end the rambling there. This has probably been long as fuck. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.